Hey, good evening, and welcome to the September 11th, 2023 business meeting of the Mildred Board of Education. Once we rise for the pledge, let us just take a moment afterwards to hold space in our hearts and remember and reflect on those lost and impacted by the events of 9/11, 22 years ago. It's been a long time. So please rise for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin, can we have a roll call for attendance, please?
Adam DeYoung.
Here.
Catherine Ailing.
Here.
Megan Doyle.
Here.
Andrew Fowler.
Here.
Tracy Irby.
Here.
Emily McDonough Souza.
Here.
Gary Pellicetti.
Here.
Una Petrosky.
Here.
Cindy Wolf Boynton.
Here.
And Susan Glennon.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you. Okay, we have our student reports this evening. Normally I flip a coin, but we got a little distracted. Does anybody have a preference who goes first? You can go
We can go
up,
first.
Warren. Law, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's great, thank you. We have E.K. Opiyami, is that correct? Opayami, I'm sorry, and Liam Balvo?
Yeah.
Okay, you can stand where you are or come to the podium, whichever you prefer.
You want to go?
Thank you and good evening, board members. It is a pleasure to be with you once again and for the new school year. Before we begin, please allow us to reintroduce ourselves. My name is Ika.
I'm Liam.
First, on Law Amazing News, we have several clubs that have gotten started and are planning to meet in the next coming weeks. We have St. Thomas Club, which is planning their Start with Hello Week next week or in the next or the last week of September. And then we have Law's Senior Student Council, who is starting to plan Spirit Week as well as our Pet Rally next week. In academics, we have the TLC, which has checked out 100 books for students, and freshmen have received a TLC orientation where students broke out a digital escape room, learned about the TLC website resources, and learned how to choose a book. AP Seminar and Medical Mysteries classes learned about databases for their research projects, and Medical Mysteries also learned how to cite an APA. And on September 29th will be their library card drive, which a representative from Milford Public Library will be available for students to sign up for a library card.
So for music, fundraisers kick off this Saturday from 9 to 11 a.m. This is for their trip to New Orleans, March 22nd to March 25th, where they will be performing music, watching performances, and also touring historical landmarks. Special education, new emotional behavioral support program, and they also hired a new special education teacher to run the program. Brian, I'm going to butcher this, Scott? I think it's Scott. Is that right, Mr. Dorsey? No, it's not. For world languages, AP French is currently in its first year running. The department is looking into starting a World Language Honor Society, which consists of French, Spanish, and Latin. In law sports action, the football team had a tough loss against Barlow. Their next game is Thursday versus West Haven. Girls soccer is 1-0 with a 6-0 win over Laurelton, and next they play North Haven. Volleyball plays their first game today at New Canaan, and soccer plays hand today at 5 p.m., which I think's gotten delayed twice already. So the start time's at like 7 something now. For English, there's new curriculum documents created by the Crosstown Committee over the course of last year. And the support center with the English teachers are starting to get very busy with seniors coming in for their college essays. So.
For the School Counseling and College and Career Center, The department started with the year with our annual senior boot camp event in August with over 90 grade 12 students who were able to kickstart their post-high school application process and connect with their counselor. And the next week, counselors will collaborate with seniors, health and PE classes, and this will follow up for any students that could not attend the boot camp, and as a check-in for those that need continued support. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all, and we look forward to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have from Foreign, Jocelyn Gonzalez and Julian Sevillano.
Good evening, board members. To reintroduce ourselves, my name is Jocelyn Gonzalez, and I am here with
Julian Sayana.
And we are both very excited and grateful to be speaking with all of you today and honored to represent Foreign High School and all of its achievements. To start, I would first also like to acknowledge the fact that, as we know, it is the 22nd anniversary of the tragic September 11th attacks. We will never forget the events that unfolded that day, the effort and sacrifice put in by law enforcement, firefighters, and paramedics, and as well as the thousands of lives that were lost. On a lighter note, as the new school year begins, Foreign has been welcoming not only a new freshman class, but as well as 10 wonderful new teachers that have been just as eager to get back to school as the students. Our senior class celebrated back to school by painting our school rock, as well as having our annual senior sunrise, which are both extremely fun events to kick off the new school year. This afternoon, seniors celebrated their first few days of school with an ice cream social during 6th period. Students got to enjoy an ice cream truck and yard games such as spike ball, football, cornhole, and it was a blast and a great way to support our seniors at the start of the school year. We are also happy to announce Foreign's open house will be on Thursday, September 21st at 6 p.m. We are excited to welcome parents and guardians to our wonderful school and see and experience Foreign pride firsthand.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julian Sevillano. I'm a senior at Foreign. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to speak in front of you and to represent Foreign High School. First, I'd like to highlight some of the big events that happened at Foreign this summer. Starting with the successful freshman orientation, led by Ms. Farrell and our new natural helper advisor, Ms. Kaminsky. Natural helpers participated in a one-day training to learn about the different ideas of inclusivity and how to be more welcoming to the incoming freshman class. After this training, natural helpers used what they learned to make freshman orientation run very smoothly, giving tours to the freshmen and helping out with all of their questions, allowing for freshmen to acclimate to the positive Foreign environment. Later in the summer, the Foreign Marching Band put on a preview show for all, highlighting what the band students learned over two weeks of marching band camp. Here, they learned how to march as a group, as well as march to the 4 new songs, Welcome to the Jungle, You Shook Me All Night Long, We're Not Gonna Take It, and Eye of the Tiger. Come stop by this Thursday to see what the Foreign Band is about. Last week, our captains participated in a captain's council meeting, where they all learned about the balance between playing a high school sport and being a scholar athlete. They were tasked with getting to know everyone on their teams on a more personal level to help strengthen their leadership skills. In the coming weeks, all of our clubs at Foreign will be having their first meetings to talk about what the club does for Foreign. We have such a large array of clubs ranging from volunteer groups such as Key Club and Interact Club, all the way to Game Club, and even some of the new additions such as our Crochet Club and Fishing Club. This past Friday, Foreign participated in a fundraiser for Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, which is an American pediatric cancer charity that aims to find a cure for childhood cancer. Students were asked to wear yellow to school and donate $1 to help this cause. Additionally, later that day, Foreign also showed support by wearing yellow to our school's football game, which Foreign won 37-12. Great job, Foreign Lions. Thank you again for this opportunity to be able to speak in front of all you, and I am very grateful for this position. Thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next month, and typically we switch, so Foreign will go first. Do we have anybody in the audience who'd like to make public comment this evening? Okay, seeing none, I'll dispense with the public comment statement, move on to my chair's report. Do we have any liaison reports tonight? Mr. Fowler?
Just a quick report, update. The Permanent School Facilities Building Committee met this past Thursday, and we toured Pumpkin Delight again, just saw more of the renovations, and one of the things that still is up in the air is doing these test pits to see how much rock ledge there is to put in a water line to the schools, so we're still waiting on information about that, so hopefully more next meeting.
Okay. Are there any other liaison reports? I know it's just the start of the school year, so we might not have any others. Okay, I don't have anything else to report this evening. So, Dr. Kutai, I'll turn the meeting over to you for superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. Thank you, members of the Board of Education. If you will, Ms. Glennon, I'd like to change the order of my report, please.
Certainly.
So I'd like for us to start with the instructional highlight and then move right into the policies. Since I have two high school principals in the audience, I may want to take advantage of them if we have any questions on the extracurricular activities policy.
Certainly.
So we can then release them to go home. And then we would go to back to school report and then continue with the rest of the agenda, okay?
Yep.
Thank you. At this time, I'm happy to turn things over to Mr. Otieri, so we can get a little bit of an update on the high school reassessment work that we're doing.
Thank you, Dr. Kataya. Thank you, members of the Board of Education. It's a great privilege and honor to be able to speak and present in front of you tonight. My first time ever as a member of the Milford community, so I'm excited about that. We are really fortunate to be joined by several members of our administrative team tonight, as well as some teachers who were really responsible for executing and carrying out the work across the district as it comes to time to talk about our reassessment regulation. So I want to start with thanking several of the folks who are in the audience tonight. First of all, our principals, Mr. Berkowitz and Mr. Darcy. We also have several of our instructional supervisors who are here, amazing team, Ms. Brewer, Dr. Gillespie, and Mrs. Swanson, and Mrs. Paris. And then also we have three teachers who are joining us from Law and Foreign tonight. We have Alexandra Shagori, Dave Pelagi, and Lauren O'Keefe. So we're excited to have them here tonight to share some of the perspective and feedback with all of you. So as we kick off into the presentation tonight, I think it's really important to take us back to the why. Why did we invest in this process? What was the meaning behind it? And on the slide in front of you, you do have a graphic that represents several of the systems and frameworks that we have here in Milford. Starting with the vision of the learner, and specifically tonight on the next slide, I'll dig a little bit more into two of the dispositions, specifically around personal development and citizenship, which tie directly into this work around reassessment. On the bottom left, you have the developmental relationships framework, and specifically we're talking about the challenge growth and really thinking about reflecting on and learning from mistakes and setbacks. And on the bottom right is our high quality instruction model. And specifically, we're talking about the base of the model. And the reassessment regulation really gives the opportunity for students to dig into not only goal setting, but also self-assessment and self-reflection as part of the learning process. And all three of those tie together, if you think about it as the hub and spokes on a bike tire, to the center, which is our goals. And goal number one really digs into scholarship. So on the top right, you'll notice, for instance, that statement ends with continually challenging themselves. This is an opportunity where we're pushing students to think about how to improve, reflect on opportunities for growth. So I felt like it was a really important connection to really tie all those frameworks together and talk about why the district sought to go down the road of looking at reassessment. So as we dig into it, let's talk specifically about the vision of the learner. And what's really important when you are talking about the vision of the learner and the model is opportunities for us to think about ways to operationalize the framework. And this was one of the ways that allowed us to do that. And you'll notice in the three statements that are there, there are several words that are bold-faced, and those are direct connections to the vision of the learner. So the first two tie directly with personal development. And when we talk about the reassessment regulation, we're really talking about setting the groundwork for school and life. And specifically, that deals with allowing students to not only set, monitor, but also adapt their goals to their learning. It's true that we need to think about success, not on the first attempt, but several students may need a more longer timeline to be able to reach that success. The second one really ties into building that skill and knowledge framework. And we are looking for ways to provide opportunities for not only reflection, but also celebrating the success of our learners as well. We talk so much about reflection and resiliency. Resiliency, that ability to be able to find those setbacks, learn from them, and continue to move forward and keep that growth mindset present. And then lastly, the citizenship piece deals with the sense of developing advocacy skills. We want students to be able to advocate for themselves and reach out when they want to seek that improvement. So those are three really important connections to the vision of the learner. So in terms of the context, we want to make sure that everything that we're doing is embedded in research-based strategies. So connecting some of the research to the process and setting the why, a couple of things that were pertinent were, first of all, we know that some students have anxiety and stress when it comes to sitting down for a test. And we wanted to be cognizant of that. We wanted to understand that there's opportunities that students may need additional attempts to demonstrate mastery or growth towards mastery on an assessment, and that one snapshot in time may not reflect the student's best self. Secondly, we know that reiterative learning is very important, and that's where students have the opportunity to reinforce concepts and skills with additional practice and reinforcement. So that also, on the teacher side, gives us the opportunity for the students to be reassessed and determine how they've grown towards proficiency. Have they had expanded opportunities to refocus the learning and show growth towards mastery? We talked a little while ago that not all students learn at the same rate. We can't think about a uniform timeline of student learning. Some students will take additional attempts, additional practice, and scaffolding to reach our goals and outcomes. So this process really gives the fact that students are learning at different rates. And then lastly, we talk about reflecting what school is to the real world. If we think about scientists, we think about authors, even doctors. The chance of developing mastery doesn't happen on the first attempt. If we take the author example, there's often times of descriptive feedback and revision that occur in cycles. So getting that perfect novel or that perfect book doesn't happen on the first attempt. We want students to understand when they go out into the real world, there's going to be multiple opportunities for them to continue to grow and expand in their learning as they gain that knowledge. So those were some of the big things that we looked at as we started to go down the road of developing this particular framework. So I do want to kick it over to members of our administrative team, the teachers that are present tonight, to talk specifically about the process that they took starting last year in the spring to get towards the reassessment regulation, and then we'll open up the floor to kind of hear some feedback around that. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Darcy, Mr. Berkowitz, and the team.
Sure. Yes, and to jump in, as you can see on the slide in front of you as well, the next step in the process was in the spring of last school year in May. Both the staffs, both at Foreign and at Law High School, had faculty meetings where we talked to staff openly and honestly about what this could look like, why we're doing this, and then provided some research. We provided and solicited feedback through surveys, and then we brought a committee together that worked over 7 or 8 hours together. Now that committee took current research that we've referred to a few times this evening. It took exemplars and examples across the state, across the country to really take a look at, plus research with some parameters, with some, as far as people involved, there were 9 staff members from both Foreign and from Law. So it was both staffs working together through this, and the administration there, myself, instructional supervisors, Mr. Berkowitz, and some others involved in the process. It was really, here's the information, work through this together, and we're here to help you, support you along the way. So that's sort of the process that began in May of last school year and beyond.
I'll just add, with 18 people on a committee, you're going to get various perspectives. But the one thing that everybody really came back to was this should be about learning and growth. Our faculties, both at Law and Foreign, firmly believe that obviously we want students to learn, and we want them to grow, and we want them to be accountable for their own learning. So that was the really a bond between everybody on the committee. And that's why eventually we came to somewhat of a consensus, because 18 people is sometimes hard, but going back to this is about learning and growth, when high school often is about grades. We wanted to kind of change the narrative from grades to learning and growth, with the reality that grades are still there. We know that students care about their grades, but we really want students to care about learning and about growing and becoming a better version of themselves.
And I think it's important too that phase 2 of the process is, this isn't a finalized document. There's gonna be opportunities this year to bring the committee back together, take a look at the work that we've done and make any suggested improvements, changes, modifications, to make this the most usable and tangible model for our students and our teachers as well. So I wanted to make sure that the continuous improvement aspect was communicated in there as well. Do you both want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of the regulation in terms of process and?
Sure. You were me.
You want this one?
Oh, sure. I'll start off. You can add. I think the most important part of this entire reassessment regulation is the form. It's a Google form. I actually printed it out so I could read from it and give you some examples. So we want students to really reflect on their study habits, their learning, what they need to do in order to learn more, and what they need to do in order to advocate for themselves. So the best part of the process, I think, and the most important part, is the Google form that students have access to. So if they don't achieve on a particular assessment like they wanted to achieve, they get to fill out a Google form to communicate with the teacher. And on that Google form, it obviously asks, what assessment do you want to reassess? But the real important parts are, what skills, content, or concepts do you need help with? Have you completed the work leading up to this assessment? If not, please explain. Obviously, not every student is gonna maybe do everything that they needed to do in order to prepare for an assessment, which we understand. But the more important part of that is acknowledging it and understanding what they need to do moving forward in order to avoid that in the future. So there's some reflection there. What's your proposed action plan to learn the material? And in HQI, we talk a lot about agency, and this really is all about student agency. What do students think about when they learn? How do they reflect on their learning and their achievement? And then from there, what are they going to do, or what do they need to do in order to improve on their academic achievement and their learning? So I think that's a really key part of this. It's not just on the teacher to say, here, take this reassessment, or do this or do that. The student needs to communicate and coordinate with the teacher and have that conversation, is to say, this is what I think I need to do. Obviously, our teachers are there to guide students in the right direction, but a huge part of this is that agency piece. And another thing that I think is an important part is where it says, what can you do going forward to be better prepared for future assessments? Like I said, this is all on a Google form, but the key piece is reflection on their learning, on their achievement, and also next steps. Because as we know, it's, that agency piece is gonna help them not only in high school, it's gonna help them in college, or whatever they do in the future. So that Google form reflection piece, to me, is the most important part of this whole process, with the end being increased academic achievement and a better grade.
Yeah, just to piggyback on some of the elements that you see in front of you, the biggest piece of this was to think of that learning as a process, not an end point. We talked about growth at different points, and that's ultimately, if you see like the third bullet in front of you, why it was very important for the group to understand and work together on that piece, that every student doesn't know exactly the same amount of material, if you will, at the same exact time throughout the year. So given the opportunities and to reassess and show new knowledge and have conversations with our wonderful teachers and staff, that if they go through all that work, then their grade should go higher because of what they're showing in their new learning along the way. So that was another big point that the committee got across as well.
So obviously, as Mr. Darcy mentioned, we have a few of our exceptional teachers here this evening. Wanted to offer the opportunity for them to share out any of the insights from the process, as well as any reflections that they have going into the process for the first time this year. So I'll open the floor up to our teachers and audience.
I think something important to recognize is that although we were a group of 18, we were often grouped with each other in smaller subgroups, which did kind of create a strong basis for us to share our ideas and then get feedback from colleagues who are in other areas as well. So that was a major part of the process. We were able to hold those discussions.
Yeah, as we were going through this whole process, there was obviously some technical sides of it that teachers disagreed on, but the wonderful thing that always came back to was the students being the center of the focus, and the focus being on learning and growth, and not about, in particular, improving grades. Like the grade portion of it was always the afterthought to the learning and the growth process.
And I think our hope was that kind of the Google form gives them a little time to reflect, but then an important part is them having the conversation then with the teacher afterwards, conferencing and saying, okay, here's what I think, what do you think, what are some strategies? And kids aren't always, confident enough to do that, and this kind of gives them a vehicle to start that conversation, which is important for them to keep growing as individuals, to keep thinking about it, not just what I'm learning for the test, but what I'm learning overall, how can I be more prepared next time, or what do I need to work on, in my skill set. But I think, we talked a lot about how it was gonna work best, what was gonna happen, but really everybody from both schools and all the different departments that were involved talked about this idea of growth mindset. And we really talked to our kids a lot about that. And to have a policy in the past, or a regulation, whatever word we're using, that said you could only do one reassessment per quarter, left some kids who didn't do well on something in, the end of September saying, well, should I wait, should I not? Is this my one time I wanna use it? And it kind of felt inauthentic to what we wanted for them. So I think, and I hope, and we all hope this will encourage them to really, invest more and have those good, meaningful conversations with teachers about how they can improve.
Excellent, thank you. So that concludes our formal presentation, all of you, this evening. So we want to open up the floor to any questions that you may have from the board.
Sure. Before I do that, would it be possible to send the board a copy of the Google form so we can see what it says?
Sure.
Please. Board member questions? Ms. Petrosky?
I love the idea of the reassessment. I think it's really important that all students have an opportunity to not just learn from the test and say, okay, I'm moving on, I didn't do great on that one, I'm gonna go, but really absorb what went wrong and learn and grow from there. I think that's the point of school and education. So I love the idea of the reassessment, thank you. I would like to know a little bit more detail about maybe the mechanics of it in terms of, is the reassessment on a module? Is it on an exam? Is it on any one of those things, or just a little bit of
Sure.
insight on that?
Can I?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Jump right in.
All right, great. Really, it depends on what happens on the assessment, on the initial assessment. So if a student just did not, was not successful on one particular concept, the teacher has the ability to just take that concept and create something to determine if the student understands it. So they don't have to create, unless they want to, a whole new assessment. We gave that, the ability to do that up to the teacher's discretion, because it might not be necessary to create a whole new assessment when it's just a portion of an assessment that a student needs to reassess on.
And it also depends on content as well, because you can imagine a culinary arts teacher or a music teacher assesses students a little bit different than English or social studies teacher as well. So that is the portion. So we're not talking about exams, that's in there as well. So final exams and midterm exams are not included in this practice. but this does include any other way that you assess a student in your classrooms.
Okay, great, thank you.
So you just said it doesn't include final exams and what else?
Midterm.
Midterms?
Mid-year exams,
Mid-year.
sorry.
Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. I also like the idea of this, wanted to dig a little deeper into it. First of all, this has been happening already in our schools before this initial, or this additional process, is that right?
Well, we had a grading practice that was in the handbook, which was very limited to only a minimum of 1 per quarter.
Okay.
However, many teachers, and I'm sure many of the teachers here tonight are some of them that actually were doing this before to a certain extent. I wouldn't say it was 100% across the board by any means, but many teachers were giving students the chance to reassess.
Okay.
We just basically took what a lot of people were doing and put it into a little bit more formal language.
So is that the main change? That's like the only change really, is that they're allowed to reassess on multiple things throughout the quarter?
And also the grade, there was you had to have below a 70 and you only can get up to a 70 was the old practice.
And it's 90 now? Is that what it is? Okay. The other question I have is how this impacts a student who might go on to a 2-year or a 4-year school. And if that school that they're going to doesn't have this policy or practice in place, what's the feeling of the committee, how that would impact a student who's had that practice for 4 years and then all of a sudden they go into a university or a college and that stops?
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in, and anyone else too, I mean, when we did the research, and if you look at it over a number of course of years as well, colleges and universities have changed a lot of those practices. So actually a lot of colleges and universities these days have reassessment sort of policies in place, growth mindset. A lot of colleges and universities, my last one was, my last degree was in a mastery-based system where I was allowed to complete an assignment, get feedback from my professor, and then reassess and resubmit it. So it's actually a practice that's commonly done at the college level at this point.
Piggybacking off of that, I'm currently pursuing graduate work, or
You're both
doing
in
graduate
grad
work
school right
at
now.
University of Connecticut, and my teacher did on the first day mention the revision policy, so it's in place at UConn as well. And also, I think from a teacher's perspective, I teach social studies, I am so excited for this because it's gonna give students the opportunity to really learn the skills. And my hope as a teacher is that they will be able to take the skills that they've learned, have them mastered by the time they go to college and be prepared in college.
I think your question is a great question, though. I really do, because that was one of the things that some people expressed concern about. Are we really preparing students for the future?
Right.
And I think people here would argue we definitely are,
Okay.
because that's part of being a learner,
Sure.
reflecting on your learning. Also, the whole idea of, okay, learning from either failure or almost failure. So we don't want students to shut down.
Right.
Because that's part of resiliency, and, you know, as adults, we deal with that every day. We can't just shut down, we gotta keep moving forward and getting better. And, you know, that's one of the skills that we really want to teach our students. But I think what you just expressed was a concern of some teachers.
Okay.
Surveys.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things that I took from your speaking about the Google form was that it really, it seems that it requires the student to really reflect on their habits almost. And I would imagine that as they're progressing through their high school career, from freshman year to senior year, you're going to see a change in their habits because they're always reflecting on them. So you would hope that by the time they are ready to graduate, they would have gotten to a point where a reassessment might not be as frequent as when they started out high school. So one of the things that I wondered about, and so we still have grades and stuff, correct? So like, it'll still be a GPA and things like that. Okay. Ms. Wolf-Whiten?
So I love this idea of reflection, right? I think it really ties into the ideas of encouraging our students to become self-learners and and really, empower them to have a say in their own educations. And I do think that, as someone who was taught in college, that idea of being able to reassess is really important, be able to recognize what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and that this will set them up to be successful when they get to college. That said, I also know that this kind of a program can be like a gift to the procrastinator, or that student who's like, oh, I have a do-over anytime I want. I can just fill out a Google form. So I'm wondering what kind of accountability that we have in place to ensure that it's really working for its intended purpose.
I don't know if you want to, just say, I think that's another question that we thoroughly discussed within the committee and outside of the committee. We don't want students to manipulate the process. We want it to be a pure process. We know that sometimes students in the past have said, I'm just going to take the retake. And that was a while ago. And that's not good, because they didn't prepare for the initial assessment. So we don't want to encourage those types of bad habits. With that being said, this is really a conversation between the teacher and the student. So if the student does not prepare properly, it's really important that the teacher has a conversation and tries to find out why. Is there something going on at home? Is there something that the student really doesn't understand? Do we need to do more investigation into the learning of that particular student? Is the student just procrastinating, possibly being a little lazy? And these are all things that are very important to find out along the way. If we really feel that the student is just kind of taking it easy, there comes a point where the teacher says, no, you can't do a reassessment. Not in the very beginning, because we want students to understand that we want you to grow, we want you to take advantage of this opportunity, we want you to learn about your study habits, but eventually, if we feel that the student was truly just not making any effort, there'd be communication with the administration, there'd be communication with parents, and there would be a time where we would say, you might not get a chance to reassess anymore unless you start doing X, Y, and Z. So that's the importance of that conversation.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
I'm probably the opposite of everyone. I'm the skeptic in this group. I am a little hesitant on all of this, as I just graduated from law school and sat with a lot of 20-year-olds who went through a lot of these processes, and they struggled. I watched them struggle, take an exam, to sit in a 3-hour exam and sit through 6 questions and be able to get through a test and understand what's going on. So I worry about that, and I have full on said to my advisors at law school is, I am lucky because I'm old, because I sat through the AP exams and I had to do 3 hours worth of exam and write the answer and get it done and do this and read 25 pages and outline the pages and do all of those things. It was not fun. It really wasn't fun as a senior in high school to do that. And so I worry about this because I've seen it firsthand of students saying, oh, we have a reassessment. We have a 2-page paper due at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. Can we have another day? It's like, no, you can't have another day. You need to do it. You've known about it for 3 weeks. You should do it. That's me, but I'm old, I guess.
Experienced.
And I do worry about a lot of what Ms. Wolf-Loyden said and Mr. DeYoung. I do worry about a little bit of grade inflation as students are able to reassess. I know there are limits placed in here, but there are abilities to grade inflate, and you have good students who might feel discouraged that, hey, I did a good job the first time, and all these other students are, oh, I have a reassessment. I can do it this way. I can do it that way. So I feel like there's sometimes a little bit too much, not too much, but I am just going to say I'm a skeptic, and we'll look forward to seeing what the next presentation says. I'm not totally, fully ingrained on this.
And you're not the only one. I think that this is really going to be an interesting process. Mr. Darcy and myself have had these conversations quite frequently with each other and teachers. And we obviously want this to work out. very well and have students do the right thing and prepare as much as possible. And we don't know how it's going to turn out. We're hoping that we can change the narrative in high school a little bit to that learning and growth, more so than I need to get an A, I need to get a B. Because what does an A or a B mean? It might mean something different in your class than it does in my class.
Right.
So I think, I hear you loud and clear. And that is not, there are many people that might have that opinion, but I think this is a way to try to basically test something out to see if it has a positive impact on all of our students and their learning and their growth throughout the 4 years.
Thank you. I do have one other question. Can you explain your choice of the word citizenship on vision of the learner and advocacy skills? And what I think of citizenship isn't necessarily an individual desire to advocate for oneself, but it's a desire to advocate for your community and to give back to your community. I think just a different way of viewing that word.
Sure. Yeah, I looked at it as the ability for the student to come to the teacher and advocate for their ability to grow and learn from mistakes and not just take the paper and put it in the book bag and walk away saying, this is the grade I got, but how can I take that and grow from it? So I absolutely understand the other side of that too, from the community advocacy point, but I wanted to look deeper at the student level as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Irby?
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. I had a lot of questions about the little details of how it will be managed, but I'm gathering from what many of you have said that a lot of that is in the hands of the teacher. And so they'll manage how they work with the students. I think my biggest concern is, like Ms. Doyle's question, along with the GPA, not from the student's perspective only, but that too, because I do have a current junior who's fighting for her GPA all the time. And those conversations come up a lot with her. And it's a source of stress for her and others on what other kids are doing. So I think that's an important part to keep in mind, that student part, but also the college application part. You did state that an A in one class is not the same as an A or B in another class, but what do the college see? What will the college get from the grades that they get here?
Colleges will see the final grade.
Transcript
And
grades.
what does that mean?
It means
whatever
if
they
they do a
them-
reassessment, if they do a reassessment and it changes their grade, they're not gonna see that they've had
They'll
five
see their final
reassessments.
grade.
Mm-hmm.
So, in general, not all, many classes will have a higher GPA, like the class average will be higher, right?
Potentially.
But not necessarily.
Will that, my question is, will colleges see anything at all on that level? Like when they see
They won't see
so
anything about the
many students
reassessment.
with high grades?
They won't see any, if a student had no reassessments versus 10 reassessments.
Not the individual reassessments on the students, but the amount of grades that are A pluses, or so many students in this school not graduating with such a higher GPA than 5 years ago, or whatever.
They'll see the transcript.
If I could add, colleges will see, we send out our school profiles that go out with all of our student applications, and that does give a demographic perspective of our student population. So they would see what the range of GPAs were. It does give an overview of our programming. It gives some insight into that. But I think the real benefit to this change to students going on and when they're applying to colleges will really be that our hope is that their transcript will be a much stronger representation of their learning, of what skills they have mastered, and make it be less arbitrary as to what does an A or a B mean. That it'll truly demonstrate student skill level. And that right now, that's, we think that's the major benefit here, is that grades won't be about behavior or as centered on compliance features. This will really be about what are students able to demonstrate that they've mastered. So we're hoping that in itself will be the great benefit to them as they move on.
Okay. So I think the challenge is not to look at this as grade inflation, but grades more truly representing what students know and are able to do, as opposed to what can they do on that one time on Wednesday at 10. And, you know, it's easy for us as a community to talk about the developmental nature of 4 and 5-year-olds, like we'll accept that. Not every kid will read at the same time, not every kid will skip, hop, jump at the same time, but we kind of forget that at the age of 15. That we expect everybody to learn the same thing, same time, right away, on the same, and we're moving on. So I love how consistently we're being, and nobody was coached, just that everyone is saying that this is about the learning, not the grading. Like, we're trying to shift the narrative a little bit, and all of us at this table are in that category. Ms. Doyle, I'm not gonna say that word, but, so in our upbringing, it was about the grade and class rank and the GPA. And so with our learning culture, with a focus on high quality instruction and agency, we're trying to shift that narrative to focus on the learning so that all those other things more truly represent what kids know and are able to do.
I'll push back on that, because all of those things still have consequences in the world of, like, what is your class rank, what's your GPA, what is all of these things. And I do wonder about what does the change in GPA affect things in terms of SATs or ACTs, not schools not using that information anymore, and how does that better represented in an essay? And so it's a complex question of what we're going to, but I think it's still important to remember that there are still, like, the job I can get depends on what my GPA is.
Well,
The school of
we
that.
probably
or
need to
of
study
this.
that a little bit more. I'm not sure that is 100% accurate in today's world, that your GPA determines your job. I would be careful that we're predetermining a child's success in life based on an 18-year-old performance.
No, I'm not saying
So-
18-year-old performance, but I'm saying that there are skills that are built, which obviously this is what we're working for, is building those skills
Right.
and competency and being able to learn and adapt to the work environment and go through that.
And that's why this is
Right.
grounded in the vision of the learner. We want all of our kids to be performing at that very high level.
And I'll just say also, for me, I think that resilience, that grit is just as important as all the other things, all the academic, the grades. Because we want students to leave us prepared to deal with adversity, to continue to push forward when things aren't going so well. And as we all know, sometimes adults don't do that so well. But ultimately, we want our students to really have that really important skill set of grit, moving forward, dealing with failure, because we all deal with failure, and some of us will quit, and we don't want them to quit. We want them to come up with a plan to improve themselves. And I think that really is more important than a grade, in my opinion. But I totally get what you're saying, and I think that was a huge point of discussion amongst teachers at Foreign, I know that, and within the committee also, between the two schools. So I think that we do have to monitor students manipulating the process a little bit, and I'm assuming 99% won't, but there comes a point where this should be about learning and growth, not about, if you're just feeling like, I don't want to do it, I'm just going to get reassessment after reassessment after reassessment. And, I think that's an important thing to really track for us, to make sure that this whole process is pure and not manipulated in any way, and really focus on students that need to reflect on their learning and growth.
So I have one last question of that, is we've talked a lot about the benefits for students, and it's great, all of those things. What's the burden on teachers and administrators to have these multiple reassessments over time and to be prepared to offer these reassessments for multiple courses and
Well, the burden on administrators is zero.
I wouldn't say zero.
No, wait a minute.
Unless-
Parents who are thinking like,
Well, until,
right?
until,
Yeah.
of course, we take concerns from parents. But really, that was another huge part of this discussion. How much extra work for teachers will this be?
We have some teachers that could help answer that too.
Carry on.
I think one thing that maybe I'll ease your mind, and we talked about it a lot, is just because you take a reassessment, if you don't have the skill set, you're not automatically given a 90 for showing up for the reassessment. So if you come for the reassessment, you still haven't learned it, you're not getting an A, right, or an A minus. So you have to have learned it and earn it. It's not an automatic given. And I think that helped some teachers who, there was definitely the voice of like, well, are we raising, you know, some students here who are gonna really struggle in college if they don't have that opportunity at a particular school. There is also some concern about teachers having to come up with retakes. What we did also talk about though is, you know, if there's a test with 5 sections to it and the student really bombed one section, that's the part you're reassessing. So you don't need to come up with a complete 5-section test again. You're gonna really hone in on like, okay, this is where you told me, this is where I can see, let's talk about what you need to do to understand that, and then how can you show me? And I do think, you know, some of our students aren't gonna take this option. I don't think there's necessarily gonna be a line out the door, at least at first. I think we're gonna have to work with some of them on why they might want to. Because it's going to be more work, right? If it's something you weren't successful in, you have to put in that learning that maybe you didn't get to because of you procrastinated, or you didn't get to because you're having trouble learning that concept. So it's definitely not a gimme, but I do think it will be more work. We talked about using some of our department, like meeting time during the day to maybe work as teams on like developing some reassessments if it becomes a big part of our, you know, but I don't know, because a lot of teachers have been doing some of this already, and kids haven't been always, you know, taking us up on it.
I'd love to dive in. I just want to reiterate that this process for the students is rigorous. Like, the students, when they go through this reassessment, they have to fill out this form with intent and with quality, and the teacher can look at that, and if the student just says, I didn't study, okay, well, you don't get a reassessment. You have to prove, I didn't study for this reason. I was busy with all these things and I messed up. My grandma was in the hospital and I needed a couple extra hours to study. Okay, that can get a reassessment. But the way that a student has to go through this form and really dive into their learning process and answer every question about what they do on their learning journey and how are they gonna fix it next. It's not easy. It's not like the older policy like we were talking about was when you request a retake, you get a retake. That's not the policy as it is now. The student has to prove that I need help on this topic and I'm going to do this to get that help. The students are actually going through and relearning what they didn't learn then to fix their grade. But through that process, they are learning a lot more about that specific piece of content, rather than jumping in and saying, like the couple examples we've seen, I'm just gonna come in and take the retake.
And to jump in as well, we did put a few things in the regulation to protect that piece of teacher workload as well. If you see 2 things in there in particular, one, you can't ask for the reassessment in the last cycle of a quarter, because we know how many things are going on at the end of the quarter. And also you have to start and ask for this reassessment within a cycle. So meaning if a student doesn't do well on September 20th, for example, whatever's coming up next week, they have to go for that reassessment. They can't ask a month later or after the term has closed or anything like that. And the process itself, as the teachers are saying, most of this process is on the student.
And furthermore, we also have spent, like this isn't gonna be totally new to anybody, we spent Wednesday time dedicated to learning it as well as professional development time discussing it. So although I'm sure as from a teacher's perspective, there will be some things that we would have to, you know, work at as it's a new process for us, it shouldn't be anything that people are going into completely blind with no background knowledge on how to approach it.
And it's one time for each assessment, so it's not like they can take
You
multiple.
can't just do it over and over.
Over and over and over again.
And a teacher can qualify what assessments in their syllabus count for reassessment. So if you don't want to have a small formative assessment like homework be a part of your reassessment policy, it doesn't have to be. It can be for certain assessments that you outline at the beginning of the semester.
Mr. Pelicetti?
Quick question to the administrators. How do you think NEASC is going to react to this practice or policy? Do you think they would be supportive of it, or because that is big in the high school is the NEASC evaluation?
I really don't know.
Okay.
And I'm not, I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing NEASC by any means, but this is really about what we collectively thought was best for kids. And we're not sure it's going to work perfectly. Nothing really does ever. But we definitely thought collectively, amongst many people from both schools, thought that this was a good place to start when it comes to everybody doing the same thing, with minor differences. But before we had a grading practice that really wasn't so effective.
And the other thing is, we're not the only school district in Connecticut doing this sort of work, and a ton of schools throughout New England have done this for 25 years plus. So this is not something that NEASC would be unfamiliar with.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Petrowski?
I have a couple of quick questions. The first one was, how are we going to try and keep this somewhat homogeneous across classes? I mean, every teacher has a different style, every class is different, but the opportunity, how do we keep it somewhat consistent?
We talked about summative assessments, which are quizzes, tests, projects, being eligible. I'm not sure if that's your question, but we want, everybody has their own way of delivering assessments. But we break it down usually into formative assessment and summative assessment. Summative assessment are the more formal, larger assessments that we give students. Everybody gives different amounts of summative assessments, but that was, and correct me if I'm wrong, or if you want to add something, Brian, but that's kind of where what we talked about. The larger assessments, tests, projects, quizzes, labs.
So I guess maybe I can clarify that a little bit. In other words, I want to go to Mr. So-and-so's class, I don't want to go to Ms. So-and-so's class because Mr. So-and-so is giving me a better opportunity to better my grade and learn differently. I mean, that kind of thing happens, correct?
All the time.
All the time.
So how, I guess my question is.
Challenge in the field of education is to shrink variance.
Right, and there's always that, I heard this teacher, that teacher, whatever, but I guess how do we make the opportunity equivalent across teachers teaching the same classes?
I think teachers mentioned it through professional learning, time around the same table, talking, discussing practice, revisiting this practice, and try to calibrate as much as we can.
Okay.
We do know there'll be some, as Mr. Pelagi was saying, he's already infusing his perspective on, I'll accept this but not this, right? So we'll try to calibrate as best as possible across the teachers at law, knowing that each teacher is going to come to it differently. And there's no accident that we start most of our presentations with reminding the board that we're about developmental relationships, vision of the learner, and high quality instruction. And so most of our answers go back to one of those core documents, and so this is about relationships with kids. And so it may not actually be exactly equal, but it could be equitable, right? That we're gonna give kids what they need. So if we're gonna give some tough love to some kids saying, no reassessment this time, but we're working with a particular student who is experiencing a rough season in life, I want us to be able to differentiate for kids that way. But calibration is gonna happen through the professional learning structures.
I can add into that really quick too, just to give you an example. So with my department at law, I'm the department head for music and art. We're spending some time in our meetings next week where two of my art teachers have the same class. One teaches it this semester, one teaches it next. And they're gonna take this reassessment policy and they're gonna decide what assessments and projects that they have that they're gonna allow for reassessment. It's one of the few classes in our department that a couple people actually share because we're so scattered and there's so many different classes in art and music. So we have to make sure we allocate that time for those teachers to allow that conversation to happen and align those assessments for this new policy.
Okay.
It's not uncommon that departments have common grading practices even before this reassessment.
Okay. Other questions?
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
I did have two
All right, and then
other
reserve
quick
eight.
ones, I promise. Are there plans in place at this point to be able to use the reassessment information in terms of how many, what modules get, more frequently requested to be reassessed, or how often are you seeing the improvements, or, that kind of information?
I will say, we've talked a lot about, we want to make sure that we have some data that helps us understand what students are retaking or reassessing. Is it just the students in the honors classes as opposed to the level 2 classes? Because this is a reassessment practice for all students, not just advanced placement students, not just level 2 students, all students. We want all students to benefit from this, and we need that information, that data from teachers as to what are they seeing in their classes. And more importantly to me is not only concepts of what students need reassessment on is obviously important, but I really want to make sure that this is for all students, not just students that got a 75 on an exam and want the 90. Not all students some students may not be going to college, but maybe they will. This is for all students, not if they do extremely well in school or if they struggle in school. And that was one of the things that was discussed. Should this apply to all students, or should advanced placement students be left out because advanced placement classes are college level classes? And the committee felt very strongly that it should be for all students, because what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to accomplish advanced learning and growth. And that, it doesn't matter if you're in an advanced placement class or a level 2 class.
Okay.
And as far as a data collection point, there's already one in place because every teacher has their own copy of the form. Every time a student fills out the form, you get that as a receipt that the student filled it out. So be able to get those sort of things built in on the fly as well. And Brian asked 10 times for Mr. Pelagi, maybe 10 is too much, and that gets that discussion rolling as well.
But it could also be an analysis of curriculum. So as we're rolling new curriculum out, and we find that there's a particular unit in science that's getting a lot of reassessments, and we just rolled it out, so it may not actually be a learning problem, it could be a curriculum/instructional problem. So that allows us to be reflective on our adult practices as well.
Yes. And then my last question, sorry. Can you talk about the thinking behind excluding mid-year and final exams from the reassessment process?
You can ask that, sure. So,
Brian, I'll let you take that one.
I'll give a global answer and then we'll let Brian. So this is a entree to us taking a look at what our grading practices across the high school period. So this is likely not the first time we'll come to this board and update you on some of the transformation. High school transformation has been studied and attempted a lot over multiple decades in our field. And so midterms and finals is a little contentious. During COVID, many school districts moved away from midterms and finals. And did we removed or kept midterms and finals here for COVID?
Removed.
And then lower
They're
the
back.
percentage to second.
They're back.
They're back.
So I think that there's just some strong feelings about those two guideposts in the year, that people feel like that is an opportunity for performance and really demonstrating what a student knows and can do. So I think midterms and finals will be part of our future conversations as to what to do with them. Some school districts chose not to go back to midterms and finals after COVID. So I think that's on the table for us to discuss in the future.
And really, the growth of not just the students, but us as adult learners as well, is that because of those reasons that Dr. Kataya just said, it was that everything that's designed, that's been presented, it doesn't mean that it's gonna look exactly the same next school year or beyond. It's for us as committee members and as adults and working with kids to see what worked best, what didn't work best. Would this then now apply to midterm and final exams or not, and why? But the committee did have that discussion as well.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Irby, you had another question?
Two little ones.
Okay.
In order to take the reassessment, did I hear that you had to have a grade below 70? Or was it a failing grade?
The old regulation stated that you had to have below a 70, but you could not get above a 70.
On the
Okay.
reassessment, you can worry about it.
And the new policy is you can take it at what grade?
Any grade one.
Any grade you want, you can get a
20 to an 80.
22, but not an 89.
Sure. But you have to do X, Y, and Z
To
for
prove
that
that-
one point.
That you may or may not earn.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
You could actually.
That
I think-
goes-
I like what Ms. O'Keefe said, you have to learn it to earn it, right? So this is not an automatic, we're not just handing out 90s.
Right.
Kids actually have to work for it, you have to learn to earn. Let's just call this reassessment, learn to earn it.
And the second one was, in response to the Google spreadsheet, if a student is explaining what you might already know is listed as their learning style or their learning deficit, is the teacher responsible to redo the assessment in a format that that student thinks would be best for them?
I think it depends on what the skill, like if it, I teach English, so if it's writing and you tell me you're more verbal, I might say, but we're working on your writing skill now.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll talk through it together and we'll conference about it and that'll help you formulate your ideas. But if the skill being assessed is writing, you gotta show me your writing. But there might be, other classes where verbal is totally fine. If writing is a deficit and a challenge for you, maybe verbal is just fine, give me your answer verbally instead. Wow, you expounded a lot more verbally than you can on paper, I know you know it. So I think it's case by case, which is why when we were talking about this policy, we wanted to make it with some specificity, but enough to give teachers that discretion, because, it's a big difference between math to English to culinary to band,
Thank you.
Other final questions from board members? Okay, great, so you'll send us the Google form, so we can see it.
I saw Ms. Griffin write herself a note.
And thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to policy, so anybody who needs to work in the morning can go. And mine is the two high school principals.
Well, we don't have to work no more?
All right.
So I'm hoping to do this one very quickly for you gentlemen, sorry. Board members will go to a second read and request for approval on two policies. The ones before you are 6145.2 and 6153, and we'll take them one at a time. 6145.2 is extracurricular activities. We talked last time about moving away from specific requirements in order to be eligible to participate in our athletic program. The dialogue resulted in changes on page 2, where there was confusion in that last sentence because the ands didn't really go together. So we struck the meet academic requirements because that really was a holdover from the 2.0 requirement, etc. So we left it at the conclusion of Carnegie units, and a Carnegie unit being defined as the credit given for successful completion of a year's study on one subject in a secondary school. And that's the only clarification and change we made to that policy.
Any questions from board members on this? Ms. Petrowski, do you have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy 6145.2, extracurricular activities as presented by the administration.
I second.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion from board members? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Griffin?
Catherine Nealing,
Yes.
Adam DeYoung,
Yes.
Megan Doyle,
Yes.
Andrew Fowler,
Yes.
Tracy Irby,
Yes.
Emily McDonough Souza,
Yes.
Gary Pellicetti,
Yes.
Una Petrowski,
Yes.
Cindy Wolf Boynton,
Yes.
and Susan Glennon.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, you have to report in the morning. You could be a minute late. Thank you so much. Moving on to 6153 board members. On the first paragraph, we spelled Milford Public Schools. I think we made the change, although it's yellow, under number 2 on the first page. We struck out both statements that they're subject to final approval of the building principal to clarify. On page 2, we included in the 4th bullet down, or his or her designee, and then the 5th bullet down, we clarified when available, and if so desired, parents can purchase the cancellation insurance. And those are the only additional changes since our last conversation.
Questions from board members on the changes? Ms. Petrowski?
I'd like to make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy 6153 field trips as presented by the administration.
For second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler seconded. Any further discussion from the board? Okay, seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Ailing,
Yes.
Adam DeYoung,
Yes.
Megan Doyle,
Yes.
Andrew Fowler,
Yes.
Tracy Irby,
Yes.
Emily McDonough Souza,
Yes.
Gary Pellicetti,
Yes.
Una Petrowski,
Yes.
Cindy Wolf Boynton,
Yes.
and Susan Glennon.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you, board members. And now going back to item B, back to school report. I'm happy to report that we've had a really great, energetic, enthusiastic, positive, but hot opening to the school year. I just want to go over a few highlights. Certainly this is not comprehensive in nature. Just wanted to fill you in on a couple of great things that got kicked off with the 23-24 school year. So under our People Personnel Services Department, as I indicated to the board, we restructured that department when we added the oversight of the school counseling program, our student wellness and development supervisors, health, PE, our intervention process of identifying students who need additional support. So Ms. Stewart is overseeing those pieces along with some discipline, student discipline matters. So she's already holding department meetings with the extension of team members, so everything's coming together. It's change after all these years of just being really primarily focused on students with special needs, so we're just looking at it more holistically. It'll take a little bit of time to figure out some of the nuances. We had a successful extended school year program for our students with IEPs and special needs. We provide summer support. I do have a dream that in a couple of years that we'll be able to combine our extended school year for our students with special needs with our regular offerings for some of our primary grades. Hint, hint, Mr. Altieri, take note that I'm hoping that we can combine forces and provide more support for more kids in the summer. We did have some changes on programs. We added a specialized behavioral and academic needs program at CAF 10. We expanded but moved over staff from foreign to law in the emotional and behavioral needs program, and are just seeing a general higher need among our students in the areas of emotional and behavioral supports. That is not news to you. We've talked about the mental health needs of our young people. With New Eyes, Ms. Stewart is really conducting an analysis of that, if you will, nothing formal. But we are talking at least twice a week about the needs, and it's refreshing to get just a different perspective with somebody new. We'll likely see some of that represented in the proposed budget for 24-25. In the area of talent management and development, we hired 49 teachers and 12 paraeducators. Ms. Glenn, I always like to get when you ask, they're not new. No, they're new to us. They're not additional 49. We are still in need of 4 teachers and 3 paraprofessionals. So that's pretty darn good shape. When I met some colleagues over the weekend who are struggling in some of our large urbans with 80 vacancies. So we'll count our blessings there. We held our annual Milford Teacher Academy at the Beardsley Zoo, as we talked about. 55 teachers attended that. You might ask, what do we do there besides some wellness programs? We do focus and introduce our folks to high-quality instruction, developmental relationships framework, and the visual learner. So we want to make sure that every new teacher comes to us knowing what those foundational pieces are for us, so everyone gets that same foundation. In the area of food services, we implemented the return to families for paying for meals. There is that change, though, knowing that every child gets breakfast for free, and any family who qualifies for reduced lunch gets free lunch. So that is being implemented with the start of this school year. Foreign high school's original walk-in cooler and freezer from 1972 has finally been replaced. In fact, the mayor and I, when we were walking through the buildings on our first day, as we customarily do, got a tour of the cooler and freezer. The food service manager there is super excited to have new. So I have to tell a narrative here. She was so excited she took us in, so it's kind of cold in there. And she said, and look at this. I'm walking in and the lights turn on. And I'm like, well, what happened in the old one? She said there were no lights. Every time she went in, with one hand, she'd have to have her phone flashlight, right? 1972. Wow. We got our money's worth. So she was super happy. Buy a girl a cooler and a freezer. We implemented the Link Connect, formerly Titan School Solution. So it's a Link Connect is another way to pay for meals. We processed 160 new meal applications for free and reduced. So there is an uptick there in application. Therefore, we'd anticipate just a slight uptick in that percentage of students who qualify. We imported all the direct certification into the CSDE website. That means there are a group of families who would directly be certified to be provided free and reduced meals. Currently, we have 1,500 students eligible for free and reduced, and 1,350 approved for direct certification. And we do a whole host of trainings annually as required. In particular, there were new requirements for the State Board of Health from 2022 food code, so we trained all of our staff on that, along with many other trainings. In the area of transportation, which you will get an exhaustive overview from Mr. Brennan in November, so just to highlight, and for your information, we do transport students to 14 of our schools, 2 parochial schools, and 4 tech ed vocational magnet schools, and the ECA. So it's not just Milford Public Schools that we're transporting to. Our preliminary numbers in the world of transportation is that we're transporting a little over 4,000 students daily, using 62 buses and vans. And there are approximately 146 bus runs with more than 1,000 bus stops. But Mr. Brennan is finalizing those numbers. And this board also has a policy in place where we review by application any transportation by request for ineligible students under your policy. We are currently reviewing the applications for 55 students requesting bus service. And our deadline is October 1st to understand the impact. So all the runs finalized, or all the kids we're supposed to be transporting being transported. And then by October 1st, we know if there's any space available for those students who are ineligible. So we're in the process of looking at those 55 applications. It's funny, my notes say the facilities department has been very busy, ! Over the summer.
Just want to emphasize.
Yeah, very busy, very busy. We know that for Pat Bradbury and his team, the summer is a go, 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 go. As soon as kids and staff leave, his people are in. And I have a list that's too long to provide you, but you do get an update from him on our facilities work. So I'm just going to give you high-level highlights. So in the world of air conditioning, that's been a topic of conversation. We did over the summer install 205 portable units. And remember, those units are primarily based on health needs of young people and adults. And those units we put in and we take out. So there's high level maintenance there. At CAF Penn, Mathewson and Meadow, we have installed or are installing new playscapes. And with the completion of Pumpkin, all 8 elementary schools will have new playscapes. So we've had those a very, very long time. They're very expensive, but we get a lot of use out of playscapes. There are different projects across the district, like rooftop replacement or repair rooftop units, parking striping, care of walkways to and from school, interior painting, blind replacement, HVAC systems, looking at rain and water drainage. So there's offices being revisited, like kitchen renovation, kitchen office pieces being revisited. So there are a smattering of those types of projects across the district. And the biggest one, I think, that has brought the greatest amount of joy is the redoing of the parking lot at Orchard Hills. We visited Miss Ianti on the second day of school, and she was like literally clocking how long it took for kids to get in to the school. And I think she was down to like 10.5 minutes or something to get everybody in. If you don't know that, that was really a very complicated and congested area where buses and cars were commingled, safety issues, and so with the repair and reconfiguration of that front, it's really making it safer, more efficient. So everybody's happy over at Orchard Hills, I hope. At least with that. School safety and security, we are implementing a new system called Alertus. And you'll get more information on this from Mr. Nielsen in February when he provides a safety and security update. But basically the summary of Alertus is that it gives us an opportunity to integrate existing and new security infrastructure so that we can, in a timely way, notify school staff and students, and here's the key, through multiple messaging endpoints. So you don't have to walk over to the phone on the wall. Remember those days? In order to alert, we have opportunity on individual and personal devices we at issue, the desktop. So there are going to be multiple points to be able to alert those in authority and who need to know of a type of crisis or emergency. So that is being rolled out. There were some infrastructure pieces installed, and training is occurring as we speak. We conduct a series of training at the beginning of the year for all staff. We have annual safety and security training. We have updates to the incident management processes. There are state safety and security requirements that we implement at the beginning of the year. And we do a retraining on how to use our radio system. We have the ability to have all 14 schools on the same radio frequency, so we do a regular training on that, and then every week we test out that system. So with Mr. Nielsen's support, we have definite infrastructure to test out and ensure that those protocols will go flawlessly in the event of an emergency. So it takes a little bit of effort, but we do it. So good news, the CAF Penn Meadow and Live Oaks vestibule projects are completed. Remember last year we had to wait because of a delay on, I think it was glass and other items. So those have been completed. And then when we have Pumpkin Delight completed, we'll have all of our schools with hardened vestibules. I think that's correct.
Yes.
After Pumpkin, all?
Yes.
Okay. We're in the process of replacing our video cameras. If you recall, that was a conversation for us last budget season. Mr. Nielsen always puts in many more cameras than we end up approving. So that is a slow process, but we have an obligation to make sure that that equipment is up to date. It's a little slower than we'd like to sometimes, but there are some cameras becoming out of date, that they don't sync with the new technologies. You know, like when your iPhone is so out of date that it won't update, right? So we are starting to run into a little bit of that on the camera side. And I'm happy to say that not only are we continuing our central office emergency preparedness, which was a new feature to our central office here at Parsons a couple years ago, we're now partnering with the city side to do it together. And so we're putting our manpower together and coming up with a building approach to be prepared for emergencies. So that is a welcomed partnership. So from the business office, it's kind of funny when people say, hey, welcome back, how was your summer? Well, we were busy. And that is very much so present in the business office because a large portion of the summer is winding down a fiscal year and starting one up. And they're both happening at the same time. So we're closing out through June, July, August-ish, and we're opening up on July 1st for new purchasing and new management. So that keeps our business office busy. There's grant reporting, and there are grant applications, lots of things, reconciling the books, and payroll processing and uploading new hires. So it's very busy in the business office. In the area of technology, we can now be fully remote in managing and assisting teachers based on some software and upgrades we've made. So if there is a staff member with a need, we have the appropriate software now that we can remote into desktops and actually help from afar. So it's immediate assistance right on the spot if necessary. We also are introducing new professional learning and evaluation platform that's going to be much more intuitive and easier to set up and easier for teachers and administrators to complete. We did make a change in that a couple years ago, and we found that there were many more promises at the time of purchase than ability to deliver on some of that. So we left Frontline and moved over to PowerSchool, who has a solution for professional learning and evaluation. We updated servers, very, very old servers that actually had to be decommissioned. That's how old they were. So we're able to configure and run new servers to keep our system running. And we are doing more and more with file relocation, so moving away from paper files to storage online. And so that's a process that's done in partnership with the business department and the TMD, Teacher Management Talent. Thank you. Did I mess that up last time? I feel like I always make. Anyway, TMD. We're just going to call it TMD. Thank you. Thank you for that assist.
I didn't say anything. You got that on your own.
So IT, I think I may have mentioned, is a integral part of HQI Live. They record everything, so they're there. The entire team is nearly there to help us with that. We've created solid online payment forms, especially for payment processes like Ready to Learn is online, Adult Ed is online, so we've refined those processes. And I'm happy to say that most of the smart boards at the middle school have been replaced with ViewSonic. Not all, but that's our goal. So we've done elementary, we want to finish up middle, and you know who's clamoring, our high schools. So we need to build a budget plan for that for the upcoming 24-25 school year. And we are constantly repairing Chromebooks, and so the IT department is busy doing that. And even though it was the beginning of the school year, there were still some that needed to be repaired, depending on what happened to them over the summer.
Catch-up time.
And this year, we purchased and are distributing new Chromebooks to grades 1 and 9. We like to keep those refreshed throughout a student's career with us. Okay? I think those are the big highlights, albeit not comprehensive.
Any questions? Ms. Zerbe?
I have a request. When you do the 55 bus applications, could you tell us the areas they're from?
Yeah, can we do that?
Yes.
If they're coming from like one particular area or not.
Oh, right, so,
Sure,
and I
sure.
think we could do
A
that by
little
bus
analysis of
number.
that. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Sure, we'll include that information for you. Thank you. So that won't happen until October, Ms. Irby.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Dr. Pataya.
Thank you. And now we'll be moving things over to Ms. Capazza for the Talent Management and Development Report.
Excellent, thank you. So this month, we have a report, which is, there's not much of an update since last month. You did hear that we have 4 teacher openings still available and 3 para positions. The good news is tomorrow, I think we're making an offer to a para and a teacher, so that list will go down. We also have those classes covered with long-term subs, so it's not like there's openings and there's nobody teaching our students. I do want to correct something on this report, on the job postings. If you notice on the side, the 3 that have dates, closing dates in June, the assistant coach of cheerleading has been hired, so that should not be on the report. The temporary custodian and the long-term special education substitute teacher, they are actually still posted, so that should say until filled and not have that date there. So I just wanted to correct that in case that was gonna be a question. And I'll take any questions if you guys have any.
The certified nurse assistant program instructor, so is that impacting the additional class that was added?
I'm not sure how they're staffing that. I know we hired 1 new CNA teacher, and we do have leads. We have, I think, 2 other candidates that just recently applied that we're interviewing.
Am I correct, we added a class this year?
You're correct. We did add it, yeah, so I'm not sure how they're staffing that. I haven't had a chance to ask that.
Okay. Any other questions? I had another, the strings opening is the same. So how many strings teachers do we have?
I think 2, and this is a .8 in addition to the other 2.
All right.
And that's one of the ones that we're moving on pretty quickly, so I'll just
Okay.
say that, so.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, yep, I don't see any other questions.
And now we'll move on to the disbursement report.
Thank you, Dr. Gattai, Ms. Glenn, members of the board. In your package, you have a list of all the disbursements over the amount of $1,500 for the month of August. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
I had one on, I think I've asked this question before and I don't remember the answer. So, page 23 of the packet, the last items, there's 4, 2 for each high school. Arbiter funding for game day operations.
Yes.
What is that?
So that is what we pay for the officials. So at the beginning of the fall time when we are about to start our sports seasons, what we do is we deposit that into each high school's game day accounts for the game day operations. And what they do is they draw from that amount, and then when that runs down to a certain amount, then we will deposit more money into there. So that's the money what they use for game day operations with officials.
Okay. Is there a reason why it's listed, like there's 2 separate listings for each school, or just the way you did it?
I'm not sure why it's listed like that, but I know that each of them comes out to be $10,000 for each school.
Okay, oh, okay, all right. And then, let's see, page 24, this is under the grant. The second from the end, Milford Board of Education student activity, reimbursement for teacher salary. Do you know what that is, or can you find out?
Yes, let me just get to that, the grant page.
Reimbursement for teachers.
Oh, so that would be a grant coming into us? No,
Yeah,
it's
so-
grant disbursements. So that's money coming into us from a grant?
Yeah, so it could be money coming in, and then we were paying that off the grant, so that's something that we were paying. So we
Okay.
paid it, and then it got reimbursed.
So a salary that we're using a grant to
Yes,
fund, in other words?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I see none.
Thank you, and that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pataya. We move on to consent agenda, Ms. Petrowski.
I'd like to make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves consent agenda items, consideration of minutes, August 28th, 2023 business meeting.
Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler has seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Ailing,
Yes.
Adam DeYoung,
Yes.
Megan Doyle,
Yes.
Andrew Fowler,
Yes.
Tracy Irby,
Yes.
Emily McDonough Souza,
Yes.
Gary Pellicetti,
Yes.
Una Petrowski,
Yes.
Cindy Wolf Boynton,
Yes.
and Susan Glennon.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Board comment, Mr. Pellicetti.
Yes, I just want to say I was happy that I was able to attend my first Milford convocation. It was very nice. I mean, to welcome the teachers back and staff and everyone. And I particularly enjoyed the law choir. Those kids are amazing.
Wow.
And you could tell they were having just a great time performing. And it was just a nice morning. I was glad I was able to go.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for coming.
Ms. Doyle?
I want to say it was nice to go to Jonathan Law and see the new track, and to see last week without the lines, and then this week with the lines, and seeing that it looks great, the new track, fitting with the Law colors and the new mascot. But yeah, good football game, so it looked nice.
Other board comment? I would echo Mr. Pellicetti. I also attended convocation. I could have reported this during my chair's report, made some opening, welcoming back comments on behalf of the board. And it was a very well done morning. Everybody was very energized, and a lot of good cheer. And I also would like to recognize, we have Ms. McDonough Souza has been on screen the last few meetings. She is patiently awaiting the birth of her twins. And this might be her last meeting. She may be on maternity leave, so we want to thank you for your service to our kids, Emily, and wish you much success with, you're going to have your hands full. Wish you much success with everything moving forward. Hope everything goes well. If we don't see you at our committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I might be here at the committee of the whole meeting, so we shall see. But if not, then yeah, I mean, it's been a pleasure and honor to serve on the Milford Board of Education. So I'll say my comments. Hopefully, I will be here the next.
All right. Any other comments from board members? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I second.
Second by Mr. Fowler at 8:37. Any objections to adjourning? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, board members.